If you perform with Ableton Live, you might have wondered how to set up individual headphone mixes for everybody for things like playing live to click track and backing tracks and that kind of thing. If you've ever recorded in a professional studio with a band, you might have seen these little headphone amp boxes. They allow each musician to set the levels of all the instruments in the mix to their liking within their headphones, and it really helps for keeping everybody really tight and playing, you know, synchronized together. So it's quite an important thing to be able to do, I think. But the problem with it is when I first started looking into trying to do this myself, I quickly realized that I was probably going to need quite a lot of equipment and to invest in a fair few different pieces of gear that I just simply didn't have the means to do at the time. So I decided to try and figure out if there was another kind of bodge way to do it, just using something really simple like this Focusrite Scarlett interface. It's got various pros and cons to it that I'll sort of go over at the end of this. All you're going to need to get started is Ableton and a laptop, an audio interface, ideally with at least 4 outputs, but more is good. Pretty much as many as you can get would be better. You can see on this device I've got a total of 4, which isn't very many at all, but I'm just going to use it to kind of show off the start of the idea here today. After that, you're going to need just like a stereo jack to jack cable like this, which is going to be our main output to the venue PA for all the backing tracks and stuff like that. And then all you'll need after that is some sort of headphone extension cable like this with ideally with an adapter, so you can do mini jack or big jack. You need one of these per band member or for as many people that you want to have on in-ear monitoring and that kind of thing. So I'm making this video in response to a comment on my longer video about how to set up an entire Ableton Live set for performing electronic music with a full band or just as a 2-piece with a drummer and things like that. And yeah, I'm just going to kind of like add a section to that video with this one. So I've got this Ableton project loaded up here, and I've just chucked in a bunch of stems or backing tracks for one of my own tunes, and I also have a metronome or a click track here to go with it. I just want to create a headphone mix setup for myself, basically. So I'm going to highlight all of these backing track stems, and I'm going to hit Command G to group them together. And I'm just going to call that group backing tracks. Obviously, we want all the backing tracks going to the speakers and the PA so that the audience can hear it, but we obviously don't want the click track to be heard by the audience. So you can see that everything here, the backing tracks, everything's going to audio 2 is all going to the main, and the main out is 1 and 2, which corresponds to these outputs here. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're going to go to the venue PA in stereo. Okay, so that cable is obviously what's going to be going to the speakers. So obviously at the moment, everything is coming out of the main outs 1 and 2. Okay, so now if I grab my headphone extension cable and let's plug that into output 3, like that. And now if I set the output of that track to output 3, now you can only hear the click track in these earphones, right? So if I put that in, if I hold this earphone right up to the mic, you might be able to hear the click track through it. Cool. It'd also be nice to be able to hear the backing tracks in the earphones, because at the moment all I'm getting in those is the click. So if I create a blank track here, I'm I'm going to rename that and call that backing tracks monitor. And here in this little audio from column, if I select the group backing tracks, change the monitoring to in, and change the external out to output 3, now I can hear the backing tracks and the click in the both in the earphones, right? So that's pretty much the basic way to do it, but there is a kind of a more sensible way to do that. I'm going to create a new audio track, call that click monitor, or just click mon, you could call that. Audio is going to come from the click. I also want to be able to hear my piano in my ears here, so this is my keys track, right? So I'm going to create another track for that. Keys mon. Audio is going to come from this Josh piano track. Set the monitoring mode to in again, make sure that's the case on actually all of these monitoring tracks. And now basically if I group all of these tracks together, these 3 here, with Command G, and I'm going to rename that Josh IEMs. Now I have a whole group here just for myself, and I'm going to assign that output to output 3 on the interface. And now this output is basically just dedicated to me for my headphones. So say if I want the backing tracks louder than the click track, or the click track louder than the backing tracks, I can, you know, for example, turn down the backing tracks channel in relation to them, and this isn't going to affect what's coming out of the speakers. Let's say I want to add band members to this. It's really easy to do that in Ableton. I can just hit duplicate on that group. Let's rename that. I'm going to pick some funny made up band names, or just some names that amuse me. So let's say Horace is on drums, and then for example now I can just assign that group to output 4, and then, you know, I would just connect another headphone out cable here for output 4, and that would be for Horace's drum mix, and then Horace can have his own independent levels all separate to mine. That can all be different, you know. So Horace might be like, oh Josh, could you please turn yourself down, your keys are too loud in my in-ears and I'd like to have more of the click. You can just do that, you know, this way internally within Ableton. So, and of course this is why you would start to need a much bigger audio interface if you wanted to have, you know, more people, because you basically, using this system, you essentially need an output per person in your band, as well as, you know, the 1 and 2, at least the 1 and 2 master stereo out for all the backing tracks. What if you want to listen to what if the bassist wants to be able to hear his signal, which is obviously something you're going to want at a gig, right? If you're on in-ears, then everybody's going to want to be able to hear their own instrument as well. That again, you could, for example, you've got inputs on the front here. So for example, if a vocalist is like, I want to be able to hear myself, you can also ask the venue sound engineer to send you back a copy of the singer's vocal from the desk, and then you can place that into one of these inputs here, and then you can pipe that back into the in-ears. Someone did ask me recently, you know, do you send out everything individually as groups in order to give the front of house mixing sound engineer a bit more control of the backing tracks? Because, you know, in the venue they might need to adjust things like maybe that guitar or that bass or the strings parts, giving the sound engineer the ability to do that basically, because when you just send them the 1 and 2, all they can really do is turn it up or down and just do, you know, they have to treat it like this main mix, right? So obviously this is why bigger audio interface with plenty of inputs and outputs is going to be useful if you're going to start going really into the rabbit hole of doing this kind of setup. Because yeah, if you want to be able to send out groups of drums, bass, effects, keys, and then also deliver every musician in a band customized headphone mixes in stereo, then you can probably imagine how it starts to add up the amount of cables and connections that you need. And not only that, but it's kind of like the equipment, the more inputs and outputs something has, typically the more expensive it's going to get. And then this is why, you know, you can imagine the sheer vast number of lengthy cables that you would have running around a stage, and kind of like the setup times involved in doing that start to get a little bit silly. You know, the amount of time sound engineers are like happy when I just give them this stereo cable, because it's so simple and it just keeps things moving along. As long as everything is kind of pre-leveled, then they can do a bit of shaping on the master out if they need to with an EQ on their desk, like if they need to cut or boost some crazy resonances or frequencies. You know, usually it's just, that's what happens, is like in certain venues some things might sound a bit boomier than they do in others. But if you want to get into sending sound engineers group stems, it is a good idea, and I know of artists that do that to kind of get an even more incredible sound. Yeah, there's kind of pros and cons to doing things this way, I would say. Obviously, it's got its limitations. Like, for example, it doesn't really have any flexibility in terms of the positioning of where you put this in the room. And it's something that you have to do in the sound checks ahead of time. If Cecil is like, oh, dude, could you turn up the drums mix? Or, you know, can you turn up my click track halfway through a song? It's not really feasible for him to do that himself, because he wouldn't have something next to him. You know, I would have to open up this group and then adjust the level of the clicks for him. So yeah, it's got that drawback and that limitation of, everyone would have to physically walk over to where the laptop is in order to adjust their headphone mix. So that might not be ideal for everybody. And of course, having the headphone extension directly plugged into the interface like this, you don't have a volume or a level control for it. Here on the front with this headphone port, you've got a volume control, so you can turn the headphones up or down. But here, you obviously can't do that. It doesn't exist. You would have to do that here internally within Ableton. But typically that works. If you're just getting started out and you want to experiment with this setup in your band, I think this is a good way to kind of start testing the waters with that before you know if it's something that you really want to sink your teeth, time and money into for getting a really beefy in-ear monitoring setup. Your headphone mixes will still all be in mono as well. That might not be ideal for everybody because obviously you're only coming out of this in mono. But yeah, in summary, I think this is just really a cost-effective, cheaper way of doing this rather than investing in a whole load of in-ear monitoring gear before you know if it's going to work for you or not, kind of thing. If you get this all set ahead of the gig, it just really takes out that whole section of the sound check where you're asking the sound engineer, can I get more of this? Can I get more of that? Obviously, this would be the same every time you plugged into it every night, and it wouldn't even matter what the venue is like because it would just be the same monitor mix every time with the same levels. So you would have more time in your sound check to spend on things that you actually kind of want to spend time checking. I don't know. It's cool to kind of save time and cut things like that out, especially for like gig etiquette, I guess, because it just helps to speed things along. And with regards to pack down, again, it's not really going to be that much to pack down, depending on how big or small you sort of choose to go with this, I guess. But anyway, that is pretty much my budget and extremely simple way of achieving this kind of separated out, independent, customizable headphone mixes for a small band. I think that's basically it. Thanks so much for watching and take it easy. Cheers.